Explain a little bit about the work you do in helping the development and growth of these cities around the world.
Thanks. Well, we are focusing on the issue of urbanization and climate change. We know that urbanization and climate change are converging in very dangerous ways, and that's going to worsen in the coming decades. Because with rapid urban growth and lack of capacity in many cities in developing countries, we risk to perpetuate some of the vulnerabilities that are already apparent in these cities. So our focus is basically on looking at how cities can adapt to the impacts of climate change, looking at which populations are most vulnerable, which sectors are most vulnerable, which places, which neighborhoods are most vulnerable. But at the same time start also looking at potentials for mitigation and towards a more sustainable future.
Just to put it into context, what are the vulnerabilities? What happens if we don't get the planning right in these cities?
Well, depending on the context, you have issues of flooding, which is very, very common, issues of landslides in areas where maybe people shouldn't have built, but where, for instance, informal settlements occur. In coastal settlements, you have also issues of sea level rise, special coastal communities and informal or slum settlements along the sea, which are extremely vulnerable, and also which are probably most of the most complex problems, because when you have to work about relocation, then you bring in a whole host of social, economic, political issues that are very difficult to handle by local authorities.
And are we looking at cities just in the developing world or in growing cities in the developed world as well?
No, we are looking in terms of our direct action. We are looking specifically to, in fact, most least developed countries, small island states, also developing countries. We are now moving in terms of the mitigation work also into emerging economies. Now, in terms of the developed countries, we basically look at possible excellent examples of where, for instance, good practices can be shared, some cities that are really leading, and bring them together and have city-to-city collaboration.
I mean, can we name some of those cities which you look at as good examples and explain why they are such good examples, why they're models?
I would like to maybe give a few examples from different continents. Maybe starting with the city where we are, Durban, I think is one of the cities in Africa that has taken I think the most courageous and decisive steps, specifically in the area of adaptation. They have a comprehensive adaptation plan. They have integrated it in all sectors of their municipal management, including water, including the link between urban and peri-urban sectors of the economy. So they're really on a very good path. But if you look at in the other extreme, cities like Chicago, for instance, have also taken a lot of steps in terms of bringing climate change very close to the citizens, making it some part of daily life, and trying to influence consumption patterns as well as municipal operations in the city, looking at green roofs, looking at drainage capacity of the city. And between cities as Chicago and Durban, there's a whole host of other in Asia also particularly that have seen the benefits, because working on climate change, both adaptation and mitigation, creates a lot of benefits, co-benefits in terms of health, in terms of reduced air pollution, and also economic benefits in terms of job creation, for instance, for young sections of the population.
Is there a big difference in your work in operating in a city, a well-established city? I think of my own hometown, London, and a city which is emerging, which is developing, which is relatively young. Are the ways you approach the problems very, very different?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, London is a good example of really looking very far ahead with the Thames barrier and the possible floods and sea surge scenarios that they are making. I think it's probably one of the cities that is looking furthest ahead. If you take the other extreme, there are certain municipalities that have hardly maybe one planner, maybe one or two engineers in their municipal department. So now to build up the capacity of such cities to plan ahead and to integrate climate change is really a tall order. So that's where most of the attention has to go, and also where more of the resources have to go. First of all in assessment, then in action planning, and then again financing some of these action plans. And that's why we also advocating for the Green Climate Fund, which is hopefully will be operationalized at this COP, to put a specific or to reserve a specific window for local governments that are least capacitated in developing countries to be able to boost their capacity to address issues of climate change and also implement some of the actions they propose.
Okay, so that's your main aim here in COP17 in Durban, to see that through and hope that's implemented. Right.
Also, it's looking at the long-term finance, also the representation, the voice of cities. We could say that, of course, in some delegations, cities might be represented through mayors that are part of the delegation, but that's definitely only a small fraction of the delegations. So I would say that the delegations are still very much heavy on other sectors such as forestry, agriculture, more the classical environment subjects, whereas the urban populations, which represent more than 50% of the world, and in some countries up to 80%, are not really properly represented. So we're looking also at ways and means of having or amplifying the voice of cities through local government associations. For instance, we had here in Durban during the COP for 3 days a local government convention, where about 140 mayors signed the Durban Adaptation Charter, which is a commitment of 10 principles which they would like to pursue in their adaptation work specifically.